Good day, everyone, and welcome to Global Trade Professional Alliance Business Health Check webinar. And today we continue our e-commerce series. I'm delighted, as always, to have your company at these webinars, and it's really good to see some familiar names online as well. And who knows, maybe one day, as the COVID crisis passes, we might actually get to meet one another face to face. But without further ado, let's have a look at today's session. Today's session, of course, is all about customer engagement. I'd also like to draw your attention to the disclaimer that you see on the screen. Please bear in mind that the information presented in this webinar is of a general nature. If you want to use it as business advice or indeed legal advice, make sure that it's fit for purpose and that you get the necessary professional advice as well. So what is customer engagement? Well, quite simply, customer engagement is a customer choosing to interact with your brand. It's not rocket science, but however, the key word here is choosing. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that your company can't be one that is doing the initiating, but in order for it to be meaningful interaction, the customer has to be actively engaged and has to take action. So while we're thinking about customer engagement, let's look at today's session. So in this session, we're going to discuss customer engagement strategies. We're going to look at localizing your website, which of course is a major component of interacting with your customers, translating your assets, because if you don't speak to your customer in your customer's language, it's really difficult to bridge that gap. We're also going to be looking at fit-for-purpose marketing and developing an effective digital media strategy. And the last topic is really a recap of what we've talked about in the past. So let's just think a little bit about what we talked about last week, because it is important to remember that all of this really does start with a website. Your website must at the very least be e-commerce enabled. It needs to be robust enough to cope with large volumes of traffic, because if you're successful, that's exactly what's going to happen. It needs to run properly on multiple devices, and that includes mobile devices, and I cannot stress that enough. It needs to have a shopping cart set up, and it needs to have a one-click checkout. Now, just to put things into perspective a little bit, eMarketer estimates that an additional 145 million new participants will join 2.2 billion existing digital buyers this year. Now, just let those figures sink in for a moment. Global e-commerce sales are estimated to rise by around 16.5% this year. And of course, a lot of that has been driven by COVID lockdowns and retail physically being curtailed. Now, what does it mean, 16.5%? Well, it means that it's estimated that e-commerce online sales will rise to around $4 trillion by the end of 2020. And bearing in mind as well that we don't really know just how effective online retail is going to be in the current crisis, or indeed how it's going to grow really. We'll only know that when this year has come and gone. That figure might in fact go higher. I also just want to point out that it's estimated that this year 62% of all global retail e-commerce sales will take place in Asia, while the US and Western Europe will account for just 19 and 13% respectively. And that is also something that you need to have in the back of your mind when you're thinking about how you're going to engage with your online customers. So what do we do for that all-important engagement piece? Well, first of all, you have to start by personalizing your customer communications. It's not enough to just send out an email blast, for example, and not have that addressing a specific person. An analysis of over 7 billion emails done by Data Axle revealed that personalized subject lines boost open rates by over 50%. So 50% more people will actually look at the email that you've sent them and read it if you have addressed it to them. You can use data from your site to send more relevant messages to your customers too. So instead of just sending a general message to all your customers, even if that has got their name on it, you know from the data that you've collected on your site what your customers' interests are because you know what they have purchased. So if you personalize those communications, not just to a person, but to the interests of that person, you will find that your communication strategy will be way more effective than if you're just sending general stuff. It's also very important that you talk to your customers in real time. And that means your customers, who can be anywhere in the world, need to speak to you in real time, irrespective of where in the world you are located and whichever time zone you might find yourself in. Now, that means you need to add chat to your website, or you could add a text-enabled number to your website so that people can communicate with you via text. Use technology. There are any number of ways that you can personalize your communication with your customer, or indeed have them believe that you are through chat functionalities, etc., without you having to interact yourself. You can have chatbots put onto your site. AI is immensely useful in helping you communicate with your customers in a way that keeps them happy and comfortable, but without you having to physically do it. It's also almost impossible for you to physically reach out and communicate with each one of your customers when they are sending you queries from a website, because you cannot monitor that site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's also important that you humanize your business. When you're selling online, you are reaching any number of people that you don't necessarily know, and they don't know you. Doesn't matter how great your products are, it doesn't matter how fancy your website looks, but people want to know that there are people behind that site. So the A/B testing platform VWO found that replacing a contact icon, the old contact us button, with a photo of a human face increased conversions by 40%. So instead of having contact us button, have the face of a person. That person doesn't even need to work for your business, really. You can find them on iStock or similar. Have a face that is warm and friendly and representative of the sort of people that you are aiming your business at. You've got an about page almost certainly on your website. Post photos of your team on that page and have a dedicated Meet the Team section on your website. People want to know that they are interacting with people on the other end of what is an electronic medium. It is very important that they know that there are people that will be dealing with them as people. You also need to be giving your customers a voice. So you can, for example, let your customers vote on a future product by conducting a simple poll. So let's say, for example, you are an online retailer of women's shoes. Spring has sprung in the southern hemisphere. Autumn has come about in the northern hemisphere, which means the next season, summer, winter, is just around the corner. Instead of just launching your next product line, let your customers have a say in what those products look like. So you might have your standard product line, but there could be a special customer selected product for the next season. Photograph of the product, simple poll. Do you like this? Would you like us to stock it? Or two different ones. Which one do you prefer? And that's the one that you end up stocking. Your customers feel that they've actually had a voice, that you've listened to that voice, and they're also far more likely to buy that product because they have chosen it. Always valuable to give your customers a little something extra. Every one of us likes to get something for nothing, particularly if that something makes us feel a bit special. Now, free shipping goes a really long way, and it does encourage extra spend. So you might, for example, have a minimum spend that then triggers free shipping. You will find that most of your customers will push their spend up that little bit extra, particularly if they're right on the borderline of that free shipping offer to get the free shipping. Give away a bonus gift. Something inexpensive, something simple, but it will encourage loyalty. And the great thing is, you don't even need to tell people that you're going to give them this. Add it to the package. When they unwrap the package, there's a little something extra in there. That could be, if you're a cosmetics company, for example, it could be a sample of a new lipstick. If you're selling things like bath products, it could a little sachet, a new item that you're thinking of introducing. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be expensive. You also need to take into account what your customer is experiencing when they are moving through your website, or indeed navigating through your product pages on a platform. The UX, the user experience, is absolutely paramount today. Consider your website. Have a play with your website yourself. Actually navigate through it. Get a sense of what works, what doesn't work, what's not clear enough, what's too cumbersome. Look at your website. Think about your buying process. How easy do you make it for people to make a purchase? What is your product range? Is it the right product range? Is it hitting the mark? Look at it from your customer's perspective. And while you're in there, think of ways for your customers to engage with you on your website. So you might have little polls here and there. What do you think of this product? What opening hours would you like us to see do when we move back into the physical realm, for example? How is COVID affecting you? Just a simple poll. Also have ways for your customers to click on things that might take them through to special offers. One of the sites I've recently seen has, as soon as you land on the site, comes up with what is effectively like a roulette wheel. You click on that and it spins around and it gives you a discount. But to activate the discount, you need to give your email address. Now, you could choose to do that or not, or you can simply close it and not get the discount. Many people will be prepared to give their contact details so that they can activate that email if it's a product or a service that they are interested in purchasing. Now, one of the key ways in which you engage with your customers is by localizing your website. Now, when you do it right, localization gives you a positive return on your investment, and that is what you are aiming for. So there are key things to think about when you're localizing. You cannot localize a website if you don't know your target market, and that means you need to do the research. Who is it that you would like to purchase your product? And we talked at fair length about that last week, so we don't need to go into too much detail now. But you need to know who you are aiming at. Once you know that, it's a lot easier for you to get your website to convey the right message. It's also very important that you speak your customer's language. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that later on today, but understand that speaking your customer's language does not just mean addressing them in their native tongue. It goes beyond just language as such. Use images on your website. People really respond to pictures, particularly if those pictures show them products in a way that they would be wearing them. Remember, they can't fit them. They need to see, for example, how clothing looks on a human being that looks like them. So if you're a plus size clothing brand, for example, make sure that your models are plus size. It doesn't make any sense to your customers to see clothing on people that do not look like them. Use pictures to show context, pictures that show where products are produced. If you're a food company, that is particularly important. Show your customers what you are all about, and of course, pictures of your staff. Very important as well that you localize the user interface and the user experience. Your customers come from a specific place. They have specific needs, wants, desires. You need to address those through your website. And try and make your life as easy as possible by making your content management as easy as you can. Automate as much as you can in this process so that you don't have to manually intervene all the time. And bear in mind that search engine optimization is not the same in every part of the world. Yes, we all know that Google is king, but Google is not the only player in town. If you are advertising, for example, and you are localizing your website to appeal to an Asian audience, you are going to have to do it in search engines that are not necessarily Google. China, for example, Google is available, but not everywhere and not all the time. So think about that too when you're taking your SEO into consideration. Now, some common localization mistakes. If your website is available in a multitude of languages, don't use flags to indicate the language. Why? Well, it's really quite simple. People speak languages in countries that do not necessarily have the main flag. So let's take English as an example. If your site has a choice between English and French, and you put up the British flag, the UK flag, Australians speak English too. We're not British. So by putting up the wrong flag, you're actually offending people. And in some cases, you're downright insulting them. So put the name of the language. Call it English. Call it French. But don't call it French in English. Call it Francais. So understand the language and put that on the website for people to choose. If you're using the name of a country for a language pull down message, a menu rather, that can also be a problem. So again, flag, country, you limited to that particular demographic. And people outside of that demographic who speak that language could have a problem with that. And again, if you're using the language and you write the name of the language in English, well, you're rather defeating the object, aren't you? Write it in the language that it is. Also understand that not all languages use capital letters in the same way. Again, understand the language that you are using and use the necessary semantics and grammatical rules of that language. So some languages, for example, don't use capital letters when they are using personal names. English does, but not every language does. So understand the difference. Another common mistake is not verifying the proper display of foreign language characters in all applications. So let's say, for example, you are a company based in an English-speaking country, and you have got a Chinese website because you are aiming at Chinese purchases for a specific product. Understand the way Chinese characters present on screen. You might have to expand your screen, and that could be horizontally or vertically, to accommodate the different characters that are not the English alphabet. The same goes for sites that might present in Arabic or in Japanese or Korean, for example, or indeed Russian. The Cyrillic alphabet is very, very different from the English alphabet. So make sure that your site presents correctly and characters are not cut off and therefore do not read properly. Now, a few hints when you're looking at localizing your website. Learn from the best in the business, and especially learn from their mistakes. And we'll look at a few of those in a moment. Understand what people have done and done well. So do a bit of a research trawl through websites and look at the other languages that their sites present in. Have a look at how those sites present, because they will not be carbon copies of the original site. Having a carbon copy site is not going to do you any favors at all. Your site needs to address that market. Also, be very aware of cultural and political sensitivities. Look at the imagery that you're using on your standard website. Is that imagery acceptable on a foreign language site? Or are you using images that could be offensive? If, for example, yours is a Western business and you are advertising to an Arabic audience and you have an Arabic website, you do not want to have photographs of women with their arms showing, with their shoulders bare, etc. Think about what you're doing, understand the cultural sensitivities of the countries at which you are aiming your foreign language website, and adjust your site accordingly. Absolutely use technology. Use as much technology as you can afford to use. It will make your life much easier when it comes to translating of your website, when it comes to dealing with queries off your website, etc. Use technology. Don't try to do it manually all yourself. And don't try to go it alone. If you can, get the services of an expert to assist you. And that means not necessarily an expert in your country of origin, but an expert in the country at which you are aiming your foreign language website. They understand their market, they understand the do's and the don'ts. So instead of engaging a local expert, engage one in the country that you're aiming your products and services at. Now, translating your assets. Translation is an interesting concept because translation goes beyond language. It goes to culture, it goes to norms, it goes to market expectations and acceptance, and quite frankly, it even goes to the fashion of the day. And that doesn't necessarily mean fashion in terms of clothing or footwear, fashion in terms of what people are buying at a particular time and what it is that they're looking for. So you might be a food and beverage manufacturer, for example, and you will find that as trends come and go, things that have sugar fall in and out of favor, things that have fat fall in and out of favor. At the moment, there's a fair resurgence of having fat again in food. We're not as terrified of fat as we once were. We're far more terrified of sugar. So take that into account when you are thinking of where you are aiming your website and how you are going to translate your assets. Now, your foreign language website, and this applies equally to other assets, if you do have physical assets, which in time you will be distributing again, like brochures, etc., these things should not be a direct copy of your native language website. So whether your native language website is in English or any other language, don't have your translated website, your foreign language website, just a carbon copy, because carbon copies don't necessarily translate. Remember, culture, norms, market expectations, etc. That is what your site needs to be addressed. Also, bear in mind that if you are translating from an English site, for example, or a Western language site where we read left to right, your site is going to be very different if you are aiming it at a nationality base where people read right to left. Bear that in mind in the way things present. Also ensure that your logo and your trademark still work when they're translated, and indeed that they mean the same thing as they do in your native language. Translate and then translate back into your native language. And this goes for anything that you might have on your website. When you translate it back, you could be surprised when you read what has actually been written. And this is particularly important if you are using machine translation. Google Translate is great if you want to get a quick sense of something. Not necessarily so great if you want to do something in a professional manner. Get the advice of an in-country specialist who also understands your market sector. So it's not enough to just get somebody in that country. You need to get somebody that understands your market sector. So if you're in the cosmetics business, get somebody that understands the cosmetics business and the people who buy cosmetics. If you are selling heavy machinery, get somebody who understands heavy machinery and the market that you are aiming at, not necessarily somebody who understands cosmetics. Now, I alluded earlier to the fact that things sometimes go wrong. And boy, when they go wrong, they can go badly wrong. And it's interesting that it's not just the small operators who get it wrong. Sometimes the really big guys get it very badly wrong too. So the Pepsi slogan, for example, "Come alive with the Pepsi generation," when translated in Taiwan, became "Pepsi will bring your ancestors back from the dead." Now, obviously a bit creepy for us in the West, but it was a huge cultural insult in Taiwan. And that is because they translated something which seemed correct on the surface without bothering to check with the people who would actually be consuming the product. In China, the Kentucky Fried Chicken slogan, "Finger licking good," became "Eat your fingers off." Again, implying an action considered rude and, again, quite frankly, a little bit creepy and uncivilized in Chinese culture. While we're on the subject of Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's quite interesting to note, if you have in probably the last year or so passed by a Kentucky Fried Chicken store, you would have noticed that in some parts of the world, over a period of time, Kentucky Fried Chicken quietly became KFC. And part of that was that the current fashion was away from fried foods, fatty foods, etc. So KFC was a lot more palatable. Now there's been a bit of a resurgence, and this is, we noticed that particularly in Australia, that fat is actually considered in moderation to be good for you. And KFC has quietly again become Kentucky Fried Chicken. So that goes back to that fashion piece. To advertise their leather seats, for example, American Airlines used the slogan "Fly in leather," which when translated in Spanish for the Mexican market translated as "fly naked." Could be a bit of fun, but not quite what they were aiming for. And one more. In China, Coca-Cola was first translated to be phonetically a word that sounded like Coca-Cola. And it did. It was Keku Kela. Well, that meant, when translated, "bite the wax tadpole," or "female horse stuffed with wax." Not exactly something that you necessarily would want to put in your mouth. Incidentally, Coca-Cola now in Chinese translates to "happiness in the mouth," which of course is far more palatable. Now consider your marketing mix and do fit for purpose marketing depending on what you want to achieve online. There are three main marketing methods. Of course, there's direct brand marketing, or general awareness, which is marketing your company and your brand rather than the products that you sell. So perhaps you're just trying to establish a name in a new market. Your marketing is going to be around that name, around your brand, around the values of your brand, etc., not on the products that you sell. Direct marketing with a call to action, particularly a call to action that links to a shopping cart, well, that's pure above the line marketing. You're advertising stuff and you're driving people to the place where they can purchase that stuff. Indirect marketing, on the other hand, drives sales through below the line indirect methods. So it's almost the subliminal advertising of old. You're telling people about the products, you're creating a need for the products, you're making them want the product without telling them buy, buy, buy. Consider what it is you're trying to achieve, consider the products trying to think about the best way to do it. And probably a mix of all three of those methods is going to be the answer for you. Now, just a few e-commerce marketing tips. You need to understand your sales cycle. How do you sell? How do you produce? And how do you ultimately sell and get the goods in the hands of your customers? Don't advertise something you cannot give your customer. If what you are doing is advertising a product line that you have not yet produced, waiting to see how many orders you get, for example, you could end up with many disgruntled customers, unless you specifically tell them that this product is a pre-order and you're not going to get it immediately. Optimize and make your checkout process as easy as possible. Every one of us has at some point or another been to a website where we really want to buy a product and it is almost impossible to purchase. That customer is lost to you for that sale and probably lost to you forever. If people want to give you their money, make it easy for them to do so. Give your customers and, of course, search engines helpful product descriptions. Don't be cryptic about what it is people buy. Understand that they cannot see and touch the product. They cannot physically interact with it. Therefore, you need to tell them as much as possible about it. If it is a garment, tell them what the fabric is. Tell them the texture of it. Tell them the length of the sleeves. Tell them the length of the legs from the waist down, etc. If you're putting clothing on a model, tell your customers the size of that model. Tell them that that model is a size 14 and is 1.76 meters tall, for example, so that they can see that in their own context. Give as much information as you possibly can about the product. Also, very importantly, show shipping costs. Tell people that they will be paying extra for shipping and get them a sense of how much that is going to be. There's nothing more annoying than putting stuff in a shopping cart, going through the whole process, and then discovering that the shipping costs are so high that the product cost is doubled, for example, and you then need to step away from the transaction. Also, give customers the option to keep shopping. So people have put stuff in their cart, they've looked at the cart, they're about to check out. Ask them if they want to buy something else. There's every chance that they might want to. Let customers also know what form of payment you accept. Again, it is incredibly annoying when the customer goes through the whole process, gets to the end where they click the payment button and they are told that you do not accept American Express, or you only accept this payment method or only that payment method. You need to tell them that up front so that they can make an informed decision about whether they want to go through the process. And if you're limiting the options of how people pay, understand that that is going to limit the customers that you can have and the people that will purchase from you. Also, use retargeting and remarketing. Now, we've talked about this in the past. This is when you visited a website, you leave that website, you go somewhere else, and that website follows you around. It is a very effective way to remind people of what they've just seen, and a very effective way of getting them back to your website to make a purchasing decision. But you need to do it wisely, because if you become irritating and people start feeling that you're stalking them, it's counterproductive. Get your email marketing campaigns automated. You cannot be doing these manually if you're starting to do them on a regular basis and to many people. Automate as much as you possibly can, and remember that personalization piece. So get the data off your website, understand who you're emailing to, and address it not only to them personally, but personalize the content. Please update your website. There's nothing that people find less attractive than visiting a website and finding nothing new. Make your homepage look different. Have different images on the homepage, different special offers, etc. Don't have a static site, because people will lose interest in it. Do advertise on social media. Most of what we buy now is driven through socials. People are making buying decisions based on what they see on social media, be that Instagram, be that LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., 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 Weibo, WeChat, WhatsApp. Think about where your customers are going to interact with other people, and that is where you need to be advertising. Personalize that buying experience. Learn about your customers. Amazon.com does this incredibly well. If you've looked at something on Amazon, you will get buying suggestions from Amazon, and they will very often be quite close to the mark for you. Understand your customer and personalize that buying experience for them. And humanize your brand. Just as you humanize your customers by interacting directly with them, and you're humanizing your staff by putting a face to the people behind your business, humanize your brand. Your brand is not just a commodity to sell. It is a living, breathing thing that people need to interact with. And I cannot stress enough how you need to invest in mobile. If you do not invest in mobile, you are going to be losing customers. You have to invest in mobile. It is estimated that mobile sales are going to grow by 34% in the US next year and an average of 28% over the next 3 years in China. And those are representative figures of much of the market. Build a mobile app if it makes sense for you. So if people have to interact with your, have to purchase through your site alone, and your mobile site makes it a bit difficult because there are forms to complete and so on, think of an app that makes it a bit easier for your customers. Again, you want to make it as easy as possible for your customers to purchase. Now, the digital marketing mix is very important to get right. We've talked at length about digital marketing and the basics of that, how you need to do it, what you need to do. So just a recap of the digital marketing mix. Your digital marketing, if it is effective, needs to contain an appropriate mix. And I use the word appropriate on purpose because not every mix is the same for every single brand and every single product, or indeed every market. Use an appropriate mix of search engine marketing, SEM. That is where you are literally advertising yourself on the search engines. Search engine optimization. What do you do for your business and your website to be found by the search engines and the rankings as high as possible? Pay-per-click advertising, the advertising that you do on those social media channels, the advertising that you do on other websites, that you do online, and indeed that you do through apps. Games apps. If you play Angry Birds, for example, when you go through that process of watching an ad so you get something for free, that advertising is increasingly becoming commercially driven and not necessarily just for other games. People are advertising products and services in those games, so be aware of that as well. Remarketing, which we've already touched on, very important thing to take charge of and to understand the mechanisms of and include in your marketing mix. Marketing automation and email marketing, again, automate as much as possible and communicate directly with your customers. Social media marketing, this is where we are talking about content. You need to have content generated that features on various sites, in groups, in discussion forums, etc. And that content is not you selling your product. That content is you showing your expertise. It is general interest content that people interact with long after they have forgotten that there was a product attached to something. Video marketing, again, we've talked about this in the past. Video marketing is incredibly effective. People are far more likely to make a buying decision and interact with a product if they have seen a video than just a static advertisement. So think about that, but your video marketing needs to be short, sharp, to the point, and it actually needs to be appealing. So just a final word. It can be very challenging to come up with the right strategy for your e-commerce business. Remember that strategy is not activities. Strategy is that which underpins the activities. Whatever else you do, listen to your customers. If you listen to your customers, you will hit the mark. And make it easy for your customers to find you, to interact with you, and very importantly, to buy from you. Listen to them, make it easy for them, and you will succeed. Now, we've covered an awful lot of ground in today's session. I'm conscious of the fact that it's probably been a tad overwhelming. I did have a few questions that were sent to me in email before today, but the truth is all those questions would have been answered over the course of today's presentation. If you do think of any questions after today's presentation, feel free to send them to me and I will do my best to answer them, or find somebody else who can answer them if I can't. And I'll give you my email address in a moment. Just bear in mind that for the entire month of September, we're presenting a series of webinars around building a successful e-commerce business. Next week, very important one, we're going to be looking at risk management. It's all fine and well to get lots of people coming to you, lots of people wanting to purchase from you, but you also need to be able to deal with the incumbent risk. So we'll be looking at risk management next week, and watch your inbox and socials as always for registration details. Now, if you need help, GTPA will do what we can to assist you. Obviously, our website is there, and our website is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as yours is. Go to the website. There are any number of resources that you can access, download, etc. And if you can't find what you need on the website, feel free to contact me directly. You've got my email address on the screen. I'm always happy to interact, to respond where I can, as I can, to help as much as possible. And if I don't have the answers, I will handball it to somebody who does and who can assist you. I've also given you the contact details for my colleague Lisa McCauley. So if you can't get hold of me, you can try to get hold of Lisa. Between the two of us, we can generally respond to just about anything as quickly as possible. Thank you very much for your attention today. I look forward to your company again next week, same time, same place, and we will be looking, as I said, at that risk piece. Thank you. Have a great day. As always, keep well, stay safe, and take care of those that you care about.